All right, everybody. Sorry for the delay. I had somebody call me. I was doing a bit of an investigation. Investigation sounds like a really fancy way of putting it. I was just basically like Googling to find out more about a hate group I hadn't really been familiar with before because I just recently became familiar with it because this guy going by this weird name. I'll explain more about it later. This is just the intro. But this guy going by this really strange sounding name. So I decided to Google the name. And it turns out it's the name of a hate group. And then when I started looking at like the leader of the hate group and I found his Instagram page, I found a friend that was following him. And she had voiced support for the Freedom Convoy. So I called her out saying like, why are you following these people? And voicing what seems like sympathy for them and support for their causes. She got very upset by that. And she called me. Yes, I did record the call. I don't think it's ridiculous or dialectically interesting enough to want to post it at all. She just basically, wouldn't directly answer any of my questions and then hung up. When she threatened me with calling it slander. And it's like, well, you're the one who follows them. Anybody can see that. That's just a fact. So anyway, it was a bit of a distraction. So let's get down to it. So there's going to be a little bit about that stuff. Let's say the convoy stuff in general. We're going to talk about the GOP taking on Disney and this culture war. And just so many layers of weird irony to that, I think. Let's see here. What else do we got? Sorry. Clicking around here. I want to talk a little bit about xenogenders. We've never talked about xenogenders on the show. Although this is a show, I am a person that, and everything I'm involved with, is in support of LGBTQ plus causes. And I think xenogender is just another way that we are breaking down gender concepts and what we understand of them. Right? Let's see here. And then, of course, the convoy stuff, as I've already mentioned. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to find my music tab here. All right, there we go. So, welcome to the Rough Report. Thank you for sticking around. First of all, to the person that called me, if you are not in support of these people, it's very easy to just say that. I don't know, I don't remember what I said, or like I don't remember why I followed them. But in the opening of the call, she was very confident that the person was not fascist and not anti-Semitic. But when I asked her directly if she was a fan and agreed with his politics, she suddenly didn't remember. It was a bit strange to me. And all in all, with how prevalent this stuff is becoming, how emboldened they are in their ability to harass the people they would like to harass, I find it extremely troubling to have that within my social circles. There we go. I find it very troubling. And She considered it an attempt to ruin her life, even though it was a close to friends Facebook post. If you don't follow that person, you don't follow these people, you don't follow those ideals, I would genuinely apologize for that. But the fact that you know, it's a fact that you followed them and have voiced support for their causes, or at least adjacent causes, got extremely defensive, and then when directly denounced them, it's a bit suspect. Gotta say, it's a little bit suspect. And you can think that's unfair, you know, to anybody that feels called out by any of the, you know, however you want to put it, social justice, keyboard warrior person. I don't know. I'm struggling to come up with the stupid names right now. That feels called out by these people, then I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. If you feel persecuted for your beliefs, I don't know, man. That's gotta suck. It's almost like your entire belief system is based in persecution. It's almost like we have specific laws against the very ideas that you try and espouse, such as, you know, the direct verbalization of hate speech. And the fact that, you know, these things in the workplace and even in the street is known to be highly offensive, outright criminal, right? It's like, as I talked about before on the show, it's just not an equal thing to say that dragging this stuff into the light for all its ugliness and criticizing it and but then being in support of those very ideas are somehow equal things, if you will. Hello, if you are joining me live, please let me know that you're here. I would love to hear from you. Here, sorry, I'm trying to find my tabs that I would start with. But it's like, you know, I feel bad if that person was upset. I feel bad when anybody can be upset. I'm a human person. But I dislike more the idea that you might be sympathizing with these ideas, that you might be radicalized. And if you are showing these signs of radicalization and support for these harmful things, it has to be directly addressed. Hey, Jessica, our loyalist viewer. Sounds like loyalist. Our loyal-est viewer. Thank you for joining us once again. So yeah, let's here. I'm trying to get started on this. Okay, so let me lead into this GOP versus Disney thing, because just recently, Governor DeSantis signed a bill essentially to dissolve Disney's private government in Florida. And if that sounds shocking to you, that Disney has a private government in Florida, well, surprise. It's been a thing for a long time. They basically have their own sort of private district that is the Disney theme park in Florida. And it is self-governed. basically, in a manner of speaking. Um, and it basically creates a tax situation that seems to more or less, um, you know, beneficial, let's say, without getting too into the weeds with it. That was more or less, for a time, in certain ways, beneficial to both the public and the Florida government. It was just within their interest to do that. Disney would take care of, their own garbage disposal, and sort of like municipal government tasks like that they would more or less not be using Florida's government services to be doing that. Stuff like that. And so DeSantis, although, okay, where do I begin with this? So DeSantis, being one of the most prominently fascistic, kind of Trumpian, outspoken right-wing figures, it shouldn't come as a surprise that he's waging the culture war like this. But what is a little surprising is that, a GOP candidate throwing a donor under the bus. I mean, Disney donates to both Republicans and Democrats. I like the idea of a guy saying, kind of shirking the money in that way. But let's face it, he's getting it from plenty of other places. I don't think he probably doesn't need the Disney money. Let's just put it that way. And he knows where his votes lie, and he knows where he can drum up sympathy. He saw the success that Donald Trump was. He saw the success of things like the Freedom Convoy. He's seen an opportunity, that, of course, that he can further capitalize on. And it's something that the right wing has always done in terms of their culture wars, trying to stir up bigotry and hatred in order to score votes, using dog whistle tactics and things like this. It's all obvious stuff, right? But what this ultimately comes down to is we're talking about the Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, which is it's kind of a misnomer. It's I see why they were going for it. Nice little tight short form, I guess you could say. But to get into the specifics of it, it's basically banning teachers in public schools from having the ability to teach kids about, the fact that gay people exist, the fact that trans people exist, the fact that there are different family dynamics in respect to those things. And just teaching that they're things that exist and are real to children. So they develop, an understanding going forward that this isn't new, that they understand these people exist, and people are diverse in all sorts of ways. But, of course, conservatives, and particularly the more fascistic-leaning ones, don't really care for that at all. And the popular terminology that they're going with in terms of trying to teach kids about this stuff is grooming. They're using the terminology around grooming, like the idea of conditioning a minor over time and through behavioral abuse and tactics to essentially desensitize them into, or desensitize, lure, coerce, however you want to put it, into sexual assault. They're taking that language and terminology and relating it to simply letting kids know that gay people exist. That as if we are grooming them to become homosexual or to become queer or to become open to being abused, potentially or for sure. I guess that depends on the right-wing person you ask. Meanwhile, the concepts behind this and arming children with this knowledge is entirely what strengthens them against this abuse. If they understand that certain things happen, are real, are good and normal, such as being gay, being open and honest about their feelings and experiences becomes easier, and it becomes a lot harder to hide abuse as a result of it. But I'm going to show this clip because I thought it was a great way of explaining this. That he's talking specifically about, like, critical race theory and the teaching of history. But I think, on that point, it's brilliant, and I entirely agree with that, of course. But I think it relates to this topic quite well as well, in terms of, knowledge being power, right? So here, let me get that up on the screen. I almost forgot where my buttons were. See, I need to do shows more often. I'm forgetting the layout of my own little screen here. Here, I'm going to try and move that down. I feel like it's blocking that, right? Am I wrong? Anyway, watching this clip. Yeah.
Woke has become a dog whistle term that's used against uppity minorities that use civic engagement to get beside themselves and quote unquote forget our place in society. That's the reason why the folks in power have such a disdain for the concept of being woke, and they pushing policies to keep us asleep. In its present day form, the term woke comes from my community, where we encourage each other to be politically, socially, and economically conscious. And now look what the term has done. It's been bastardized. I see the finesse game they're trying to pull on us. They used to say you cannot complain about what's going on in politics because you don't vote and you're not politically educated. Now they dry-ass passing bills that hedges against us being politically involved and politically educated. That's on the Stop Woke bill. That's on all the bills they passing that makes it harder for us to get to the booth. This sounds like some mastery, pimp, master manipulation bullshit right here. We're going to say you shouldn't talk about the process if you don't know about the process, but then we're going to try to make it where you don't know about the process and can't get involved in the process.
Oop, sorry. I always hit that wrong button. Brilliant. Yeah. It's so perfectly said in terms of, why they would want to purposefully keep this knowledge from anyone. Right? It's obviously to create a false reality where their racism is correct, their bigotry is correct, and essentially trying to manufacture and engineer truth in all the same ways that they accuse the left of being. Right? And that's the obvious thing. It's all a giant projection, right? Giant projection. Like almost everything they try and throw at us is a projection, right? So, of course, yeah, like freedom of speech, freedom of thought, all about the truth, man. And then they literally support bills that aims to miseducate and create a false sense of history and a false sense of reality. And what they're doing to woke with those bills that he was just talking about is what, everybody I'm running into online these days who's on the right is doing to groomer. And the terminology around grooming and how it relates to sexual abuse. It's pretty odd how abuse in evangelical circles, one of the biggest voting bases of the Republican Party, is so prominent. Let us not forget, I was just recently watching a video on this, actually. I wish I remembered the YouTuber's name. I would shout it out. But she's done a bunch of videos on the Duggars that are quite investigative. And one thing I wanted to point out was this. The Advanced Training Institute International, which is the homeschooling method, faith-based sort of, well, not sort of, just like extremely faith-based learning, like homeschooling program that the Duggars are big on. Apparently, it had even featured on their reality show and stuff like that. Yeah, was it through ATI as an enrollment program concluded in 2021? The ATI Wisdom Booklets, a study of Jesus Christ's Sermon on the Mount from Matthew 5 through 7, are in the process of being made available to anyone. We continue to strongly encourage every family to make the wisdom and truth of God's Word the foundation of their family and home discipleship. This homeschooling program has a section on, like, how to I think it was like, why did God let this happen? And basically rationalizing in the most disgusting ways sexual abuse. Basically, the Duggar girls that were abused by their brother Josh under this training were taught that essentially it was their fault for tempting him. Like, true groomer shit. True shit where if you are not educated properly on this and armed with the knowledge to know better, having an adult and an authority figure say, this is your fault, you're a sinner, you're not good, and this happening to you is something that is your fault and bad. It shames them into never seeking justice, right? They're never going to stand up for themselves if they feel implicated in their own abuse. And that's a huge part of like the silencing and the grooming process, right? But this is the very thing that programs like this, like evangelical voter base, right-wing voter base, not everybody on the right, obviously, not everybody who votes Republican, but they do have to reckon with the fact that they tacitly vote for it, right? That they're not anti it enough, like how I feel about people who voice support for some opinions of fascists, right? Especially without not actively denouncing the obviously bad ones. And it's so obvious to so many of us what the aim and the goal is here, right? When you're talking about suppressing certain kinds of information and withholding it from people, that should immediately raise some alarm bells, right? It's not the same as withholding information from people because we have already actively found out, learned as a society and a culture, however you want to frame it, that say, racism is bad and is harmful and it's a cancer on society and we should take certain measures to discourage it, mitigate it, whatever, right? Criminalize it. And all these people on the right want to do is, in the name of defending children, actively create the conditions where abuse is going to happen. Like, we know this about the Catholic Church. And there's no doubt that keeping children unarmed with this knowledge is going to continue the cycle of abuse that we all know exists. The grift should be screamingly obvious to people. So, DeSantis signs bill to dissolve Disney's private government. What does this have to do with Disney, you ask? Well, of course, Disney, as they exist in the culture currently, has to, in its own business interest, let alone probably the numerous amounts of people that work for Disney that are gay, trans, so on and so forth, generally in a position in life that would be harmed by fascism. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Friday signed a bill to dissolve Walt Disney's after the entertainment state law critics have opposed. Yeah, okay. I was looking for the terminology here. After the entertainment giant opposed a new state law critics have dubbed "Don't Say Gay." Basically, all it's been is words. I think like either the CEO or somebody high up at Disney, something like that, just basically said, we don't support this law and we'd like to see it repealed. And, of course, Governor Ron DeSantis considers this a direct threat to not himself, but, to freedom, I guess. But it's obviously to himself because it plays against his interest in the culture war that he's trying to wage that seems to, going to have the direct opposite effect of what they claim it's going to be. Right, in their obfuscation of, say, terminology like grooming. The move could have huge tax implications for Disney, whose series of theme parks have transformed Orlando into one of the world's most popular tourist destinations, and serves to further sour the relationship between the government-led government and a major political player in the state. Now, it's so funny that these guys will take the government money, will take the lobbyist money, and somehow consider these corporations in these corporate entities not corrupting and influencing the government, or these entities not being political in a certain capacity and not playing politics or using their power to play politics. It's all well and good when it's coming through the form of lobbyism and what have you. But Disney just simply raised their voice about thinking this law is bad and should be repealed. And suddenly this is an overstep of power. It's just soaked in irony. Like the fact that, these so-called free speech warriors are getting mad at a private corporation that they legally consider, having personhood in many respects. A corporation is a person in legal terms. Suddenly, they're not so entitled to their free speech. And the government is going to directly put through laws to spite them because they don't like what they said. I mean, feel how you're going to feel, like, from a leftist perspective. I had a lot of problems with Disney in terms of, how large they are, how they function, how they treat workers. A lot of issues to unpack there. But in terms of their own, the Republican Party and the right's own ideas about what freedom is, about standing up for what's right and whatever, and their freedom, that they go and do shit like this, the second it kind of threatens the social engineering that they're after. And that's entirely what it is. They're literally trying to manufacture a culture and manufacture an image and a false idea of America and America's history and how it relates to the world. And people in Canada are absolutely picking up cues on that. You know, we've only seen the threat of hate and fascist violence expand over the past 20 years especially. And although I like to think it still exists in reasonably small numbers, the fact that regular, everyday people who might be sort of apolitical in a lot of ways, here, sorry, I'm going to turn this up a bit, that might be apolitical in a lot of ways, are finding themselves sympathizing with fascists, right? And then getting very confused and hurt if anybody calls them out for sympathizing with fascists because they don't understand even what they're supporting. Sorry, I'm on the quit smoking train, and I meant to have a cigarette before the show. I was trying to put everything together for this. So I'm vaping on the show. Is basically what I'm saying. And I'm feeling a little spoiled on the vape because I don't have to get up and go outside to smoke. So yeah. It's not the same as smoking, though. I'll say that much. Like, I still want to smoke even after I had this. Like it's weird. I still want the ritual of the taste and the feel and the act of, you know, getting up, going outside on the porch, having the smoke. That part isn't satiated. Just the kind of, I guess, drive for nicotine gets satiated. So I have been smoking less, but there's this whole psychological aspect to it. Sorry, total tangent. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, what is it? The law would eliminate the Reedy Creek Improvement District, as the 55-year-old Disney government is known, as well as a handful of other similar districts by June 2023. I don't know how many of these districts there are. It's kind of fascinating in a way. You know, from like a capitalistic liberal society standpoint, it does seem to be sort of mutually beneficial to both government and taxpayer. And it basically, there's going to be like a huge loss of tax revenue and expenditures for the Florida government as well as a result of this, that is going to fall on the lap of the Florida taxpayer and create a tax burden on them that is going to have to be filled out by them. So it's just going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But basically, I guess my magnum opus of... Ooh, did my sound just cut out, or was that just my headphones? I think I have a loose wire in my headphone extension. I guess my sort of like master thesis in this episode and everything I've been saying so far is, the creating the conditions of normalizing and executing certain types of bigotry under the guise of protecting children, not being manipulated by the government and those liberals. Meanwhile, it's literal government manipulation. And it's like the boiled frog technique of engineering society and getting people indoctrinated into a certain way of thinking that is that normalizes hate. And I find that extremely concerning. For instance, in this hate group I was looking into earlier, let's see here. Just reading this article. What is the Diagolon extremist group and what does it want? So, Diagolon can be categorized as an accelerationist group according to researchers who study extremism. Director of the Center of Bias, Hate and Extremism at Ontario Tech University, Barbara Perry, defined accelerationism as the intent on accelerating or fomenting a civil war, overturning what they see as the corrupt, illegitimate order. So, where did it come from? The Diagolon Group is a loose network of people with neo-fascist militant views and emerged from a group of live streamers called the Plaid Army, according to the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. More on them later. The Plaid Army has been accused of platforming and espousing rampant racism and anti-Semitic content in their streams and had a couple of mainstays on their shows, including Jeremy McKenzie, who's identified by the Hate Network as the de facto leader of Diagolon in Canada. Now, when I looked into... Oh, sorry. Here, sorry. Let me take the screen down while I find this. What is it? I think it was in the, what are the group's motivations? Yeah. Speaking to the greater point I was talking about before, let's put this up on the big screen. In an email to ctvnews.ca Thursday, the Canadian Anti-Hate Network said Diagolon is an excellent example of how irony poisoning can be used to warp an online joke into a movement. Irony poisoning is a term used to describe the process of desensitization to extremist, hateful rhetoric by the use of humor, and especially on the internet, memes that assist in sliding a person further into spheres of fascism, white supremacy, and violence. The Canadian Anti-Hate Network said in its email that Diagolon quickly attracted a network of like-minded anti-authority individuals. And to kind of further demonstrate how this works and kind of blows a big lid, in my opinion, off of how right-wing networks use, abuse, and spread disinformation. I have this video pulled up of this guy who will describe how he was sucked into that world and what he came to find out from doing so. He's, going by, the term whistleblower, I guess that's appropriate. Cowlin Robertson said on how they would manipulate the media. You'll see. Here, let's get that pulled up again.
Joining us. So you specialize in getting these far-right clips to go viral. So what was the formula that you found worked best?
Well, when I first started all this, I had been consuming radical content on YouTube for about 6 months. After the Orlando shooting, I remember I typed...
6 months. That's all it took him of consuming this radical material.
That theme into YouTube and was inundated with YouTube videos from Rebel Media and One American News Network type channels, and ended up going down that rabbit hole. I ended up becoming a correspondent for Rebel Media, of which I obtained millions of views. And my boss always told me, and the bosses of these other organizations always told me, that we should never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And if we can get people angry, and if we can get people upset, then we can make more money, we can make more profit, and we can drive the algorithms to keep pushing these videos. It's what made me feel very disenfranchised and end up speaking out about it all in the end. But as someone who really believed in it and believed that, free speech was under attack and that the West was being invaded and all these ideas that they were pushing, I really felt that if I had to take part in disinformation and take part in bending the truth, that it was for the greater good. But actually, my bosses and the people at the top of this ecosystem, from Newsmax and all these organizations, from Project Veritas, which collaborated with Rebel at the time, it was all fair game because the left were just so terrible. But actually, the kind of tactics that they were engaged in, and even myself now looking back were engaged in, were far worse than the quote-unquote liberal media and CNN and any of these groups ever took part in. It was completely devoid of any realism or any journalism. We would go to quote-unquote no-go zones in 2018 when Fox News would hype up that whole situation. And we would create conflict and then selectively edit it to look like those areas were far more dangerous than they were. Those videos would obtain millions and millions of views. Again, I regret that massively. The only reason I did it was because I was radicalized by those people and felt like it was for the greater good and it was a bit of a cult, but those people profited massively from it, and it was always about pushing disinformation. Alex Jones, who I spent a lot of intimate time with, and a lot of the people that employed me, told me openly that they thought the whole Pizzagate stuff and the pedophile stuff and all the stuff that they were pushing is something that they don't really care about or really believe in. But it whips up their audience into anger, and it gets them to buy products on their news nights.
Yes. And there you go. It whips up people into anger, and that has a real effect on real people. Right? When you get a certain subsect of society riled up by believing these lies, I think it's amazing what he's doing by blowing the lid off of this. It's just incredible. And should show how no matter what you are, who you are, where you're from, it's possible to be radicalized by this stuff. It's possible to be sucked in and start to believe things that you wouldn't normally believe. And we should be diligent and careful about that. And, sometimes I react hotly to that. And I've yet to feel unjustified in doing so. Let's put it that way. So let's get to our final topic here before we wrap the show up. On last episode, I showed some clips from Caryma Saad, as she calls herself, a lawyer and a political satirist, who is, was documenting the hate rallies. Well, not they're hate rallies. Let's put it that way. In a manner of speaking, it's got the fascist backbone, like I've been explaining this whole time. The anti-vax rallies. She's been showing those, kind of seemingly to be a good actor. Unfortunately, as it turns out, there's some reasonable criticism against her. And it seems like as much as she's an anti-vax, sort of critic, she doesn't like, ostensibly, when anybody criticizes her or perhaps her motivations, and maybe her motivations aren't that pure. So in the sense of I want to believe that, or at least wanted to believe that Caryma was a good faith actor, I'm going to show you why I have reason to doubt that now. On a Twitter thread that does a great job explaining this, Ms. Fitz, MZFITZZZ, is the @ on Twitter. A lot of new followers who seem confused by an issue we educate on. We thought we'd provide clarity on Caryma Saad, at Caryma Rules on Twitter, putting bounties on, doxing, stalking, and harassing and abusing her powers as a lawyer to meticulously go after marginalized people who criticize her. And the thread goes on to basically explain 2021, January 10th, Caryma planned to hold a wrestling-style show in the community displacement garden at 222 Spadina in Chinatown. Her main event was interviewing Chris Sky, notorious Holocaust denier, anti-vaxxer, masker. So, like, you know, that there's that crossover again between the anti-vaxxers and the anti-mandate people and fascism. Again, if you are an anti-vaxxer and have fallen into that rabbit hole at all, I hope that really makes you question where you stand, that so many of these people you are sharing a social circle with, right? So here's that poster, and it doesn't entirely seem like this, like she's putting on this event herself. This is an event that she organized. From the looks of this promotion and live in interview, not a debate, not openly saying I'm challenging these ideas, but a main event interview with this sort of like wrestling style sensationalist poster. Everything's supposed to be very entertaining, which I don't think is reflective of political intent. Like, you know, to you know, challenge these people's political ideas and making the event about that, right? Right off the bat, it doesn't seem like a great way to promote this event. It seems very ill-advised. And prior to the event, community members and community groups such as the Chinatown I'm sorry, I don't know what the acronym stands for. Oh, Friends of Chinatown. Oh, okay, FOCT. The Friends of Chinatown group fighting for community-controlled affordable housing, racial justice, and economic justice in Toronto's downtown Chinatown. And the Kensington Tenant Network issued statements urging her not to go through with the event, to which her reply was, more often than not, blocking any user who gave her a modicum of criticism. And evidently her response was to issue a public letter from her lawyer. You probably can't read that on the small screen anyway. From her lawyer, which threatened any opposition to this event with trespass notices from security and on-site police, and also promised to prosecute those that were uninvited to the fullest extent of the law. So, doesn't seem like she's very open to the dialogue here, right? Very odd. The guest list was capped to 25 people. In the days leading up to the event, she blocked any criticism leveled at her. On the night of the event, local community members and anti-fascists showed up and created a blockade, which blocked the outside entrance to the garden using a banner that said "Red Masket or Casket." The same group Caryma had lauded months earlier. They had the same poster at a different event. They showed up to Nathan Phillips Square to counter-disrupt anti-vaxxer maskers from harassing people at a massive vaccination pop-up clinic in the city. To nobody's surprise, the Toronto police were not on site for that. Witnesses alleged that security had no idea what the gravity of this, again, an event that Caryma built and organized, and that they were there to provide services to a simple comedy show and were allegedly only instructed to remove homeless people from the garden. Can't have those homeless people in sight for your interview with the fascist guy, I guess. It's also alleged... No, okay, that's kind of beside the point. Predictably, the night of the event went exactly as people and community groups warned. A swarm of racist, anti-vaxxer, and anti-maskers descended on Chinatown. There were reports of harassment. Of course there was. xenophobia, open liquor, transphobia, homophobia, and general rowdiness. When they arrived, they were met with opposition by local community members and anti-fascists. Naturally. Also predictable, Chris Sky and racist anti-vaxxer maskers followers became violent and attacked several of the protesters when they realized they wouldn't be allowed in. Because, again, the event itself was capped at only 25 people. What probably wasn't predictable is that Caryma and her marketing team had not communicated the blockade to Chris Sky and his cohorts in the hours previous and weren't present when he arrived or when the violence started. Caryma, witnessing the whole thing from her office, didn't call 911, but instead the non-emergency line. By the time police arrived, the protesters dispersed and only the racist anti-vax maskers remained. And she levels this criticism here on this. Congratulations, friends of Chinatown. You turned an event that was supposed to feature diverse voices at variance with the anti-mask vax movement into a Chris Sky rally. I failed to see how your marketing for this or any of your actions leading up to it didn't really pitch itself as a Chris Sky rally. Yeah, it seems like you built a Chris Sky rally. He was never going to be platformed in the context of my event. Your so-called counter-protests created violence. That seems very disingenuous to me. Very disingenuous and disappointing, quite frankly. And after taking some pics with Chris Sky's surety, Dr. Z, and being candid with Sky, she got back to Twitter and started a narrative that it was the mere existence of the protesters that was the cause of the violence, not Sky or his crowd. The following morning, she was still pushing the narrative, as well as accusing protesters of being violent, militant, blah, blah, blah. What is it? And then, like, this same thread from Ms. Fitz, go and read the whole thing if you want. I won't go through it step by step. I think I've hit some of the major points. But anyway, okay, this is going to relate to some of what I'm going to get to in a minute. Also on July 13th, the Anti-Hate Network released an article which was written by someone who video documented the event, but it was also a well-known progressive activist in Toronto who had been documenting the anti-vax maskers for over 2 years. He had been doing this for over 2 years and didn't make a lot of self-promotion out of it, evidently, in the same way that Caryma has, or Caryma, sorry. After the article was released, her full vitriol towards anti-fascists seemed to come out. She lashed out at both the Anti-Hate Network and the author, and her and Dean Blundell, who's been, a pretty unsavory radio personality for many reasons, who she seems to have allied with, made a new friend in Brian Trottier. Brian has a bone to pick with many anti-fascists, but the one that Caryma initially set her sights on, who also attended as a witness that night and was voicing his concern over her narrative versus what he experienced, now known as Josh, he got ahead of the impeding docs he was about to receive and wrote a thread of his own, basically. Gets into how Caryma essentially tried to dox and harass other community members. Gets into that. But in relation to a lot of the points that I was mentioning in those earlier tweets, Caryma has a defense for all of this. And I didn't find it very savory in general. She has her own thread on the matter. You can go to it, Caryma Rules, on Twitter. If confused over misgivings about the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, read on. Thread involves former neo-Nazi current board member Liz Moore. I'm not sure if she's a former neo-Nazi, but former neo-Nazi is generally a good thing. And if you're managing the Canadian Anti-Hate Network and putting a lot of effort into the exposure of fascism, which in my experience is a good thing that the network does. I've read many things by them. I'm already suspect, basically, in this opening right here, right? But then it goes on. I stumbled into COVID denialism coverage like it was kismet. Kind of a weird way to phrase that, too. Like, I'm getting the general impression that Caryma's coverage of this and any criticism she might have of it is more engineered towards her self-promotion and her own business interests, and capitalizing and building a brand around these people, these hateful figures. And not so much as a critic, or at least not enough of a critic, if you will. My interactions with the Canadian Anti-Hate Network were positive, mostly positive, prior to July 2021. Because prior to July 2021, they didn't criticize her specifically, right? On July 5th, I announced my intention to interview Chris Sky, a verbal smackdown of sorts, advertised in my style of appropriating wrestling culture. My style of appropriating wrestling culture is a weird way to phrase, again, how sensational you made this look and how you didn't advertise it as a verbal smackdown of Chris or any sort of debate or challenging of his ideas, but an interview. So that seems like a disingenuous defense right there. Now, relating to what the last person had said about her kind of basically waving away any criticism and blocking it out, Liz Moore from the Canadian Anti-Hate Network reached out and asked me to reconsider. I declined. Respectfully, I do not take my cues on fighting racism from white women, especially not former white supremacists. You know, in terms of, identity politics factors certainly matter. And I am aware of the fact that I am a white cis man, or as far as I've explored myself, I think I'm cis. Maybe. Anybody who knows me knows I can lean towards not being gender binary entirely, let's say. But anyway, that's besides the point. I'm aware of as the type of person you see before you and how that relates to identity politics. I am aware, just to put that forward. But my general philosophy is that on these matters is that, of course, identity politics matters, and support for minorities matters. I would place class antagonism and class divide above that sense of id pole because they're intersectional issues and one drives the other. Various toxic aspects intrinsic to capitalism depend on these bigoted ideas in order to further itself and function, right? So boosting the voices of minorities is and creating conditions of proper representation to resist this history that has suppressed them for so long and correct the mistakes of the past is, of course, hugely important, right? But it wasn't just Liz Moore who specified this. It was other members of the community who are not white and are not former fascists. Again, anybody who has de-radicalized away from that, I think they should be commended. It's definitely not an easy task in many respects. But anyway, moving forward. she wasn't the only one who had these concerns, right? And so just conveniently ignoring that. Hi. Nat's with us.
Just wondering how much longer you're going to be. If you want
Few
me to
minutes.
sit in for 10 minutes. D&D resumes at 10 o'clock, so do you want me to sit in?
I don't have a microphone for you.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay. Love you. I'm only going to be a few minutes anyway. I'm almost done. All right. Nat wanted to sit in for a few minutes, but she'll have to wait till next episode. We're going to have Nat next episode. Her final D&D tonight. I thought her last D&D thing was the final one, but she's having her final D&D thing tonight. So, yeah. She's going to join us on next week's episode for sure. Now, radicalization, as Caryma says here in her thread, radicalization is a daunting phenomenon, but suppressing speech isn't the answer. Censorship stifles the process by which we should search for truth. Censorship limits our ability to actually agree on what is and what isn't dangerous. And to be clear, I wasn't hosting a hate group event. Again, I have some serious questions in terms of how that event was marketed, that it wasn't somehow very ostensibly not anti-hate. You know, yeah, it's always in there. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I think it's just very interesting that suppressing speech isn't the answer. Censorship stifles the process by which we search for truth. But the people who were against her event, she tried to stifle as much as possible, even by threatening legal action if they showed up. Just a tad contradictory, I might say. Just getting, like, you know, as I read through all this stuff, I just found myself being more and more disappointed. Whether or not my production was ill-advised, we can agree to disagree. It was plainly a legal form of peaceful political expression premised on civil discourse. It wasn't clearly that. I'm sorry. It just wasn't. It wasn't clearly that at all. I wasn't aware of Caryma when this was going down, and I was living in Toronto at the time. I certainly would have been a lot more engaged in it had she even been on my radar at all. But premised on civil discourse. The thing is, when you platform, and that is what it is, when you call this an interview, and when you put that person on the stage and don't want them to be protested. Sorry, that the fallout of that is platforming, in my opinion. The thing about saying premised on civil discourse, and we gotta, be democratic and diplomatic and bridge the gap and talk to these people and communicate and reveal the truth through this civil discourse. When you're talking about like racists and Holocaust deniers and people who are just anti-science, anti-fact, and they have already been exposed as such, and it should just be considered good and normal at a certain point that their ideas are bad, to platform them on the idea of, well, we just got to have a civil discourse. It's like we're way past that. We're way past that in terms of racist, anti-science, Holocaust-denying people. We don't owe them any more civil discourse. I'm sorry, but this is a subject that has been well covered. Well covered. What are you going to add or show to people that can't already be seen and demonstrated? You know what I mean? How is this educational even? It's just silly at a certain point where we just you keep pretending that these ideas haven't been defunct by saying, well, we have to address these ideas. And it's like they've been addressed. Show them the material where this has already been taken care of. And this is the problem with, like, you know, again, kind of relating to everything I was saying before, creating and engineering a society that is ahistorical and doesn't recognize the historical real stuff that has happened already, that we have been through as a society, as a country, as a planet. And pretending like these old bad ideas that we know are universally harmful are still things that just deserve discussion. It's weird. Hey, Katie, thank you for joining us late. You know, it's just nice that you're here. I'm glad that you're here. We're talking about basically, well, you know, you heard what I was talking about, where the silliness of platforming a figure like Chris Sky is under the idea that you're the one challenging their ideas, when, again, the event was not marketed or pitched as such in any capacity. When this has already been done, you know? Like, you're going to have an event with somebody who, like, you know, what's the next event? Suffrage? You're going to have a debate with a misogynist about women's suffrage? Like, that's an idea that still needs to be discussed and unpacked. Like, we don't already know it's stupid. Being anti-suffrage, that is. I do support women's rights to vote, instead, in case that wasn't obvious. Yeah, the venue for the private event was private property, the mall, with quasi-public access directly outside the unit I've rented. Her own business, by the way. I had permission to use the space, and yet the evening of July 10th, 2021, there's a blockade in front of the courtyard staircase. I mean, if it was a private, closed-off event, I don't know. What's the problem with the blockade? It seems like you didn't have adequate security for the event that you are hosting, and did not take any responsibility for that. Unpopular opinion. Instead of preventing an event from bringing harm to the community, protesters helped create a confrontational situations themselves, and then were upset when it turned into one. I don't know, Caryma. It seemed like you invited that to me. Am I wrong here? It just doesn't look great. I don't know why a bunch of adults, both protesters and anti-maskers, felt entitled to cosplay as warriors at my expense, as if she was the center of it, right? What should have been an engaging and thought-provoking show devolved into a street ball. What, again, just like I was saying, what was supposed to be thought-provoking about talking anti-vaxness, something that's already been discussed at length and we already have the knowledge and the access to, and no less a guy who's a notorious racist and bigot. What was going to be thought-provoking to this audience about this discussion in any way? Morgan, you publicly impugned my credibility leading up to and after the event. This includes calling me a bad actor, stating outright that I have no conscience, insinuating I'm not part of the actual community, and comparing me to Andy Ngo. And he got a Canadian Anti-Hate Network byline. I mean, as somebody who is poisoning themselves as a public figure, throwing these public events with notable people who have been in the news and platforming them, you're a public figure now. You know, like they can write stuff about you and what your activities are. especially when they're taking place in the community and cause something and is something that is, let's say, newsworthy. They're free to do that. And worth noting, Morgan, you appeared to assist the blockade, such as by repositioning bikes to tighten formation and adjusting the banner to make it more visible. At the end of the night, he swore at me in front of a group. Caryma, you're so fucked. It felt like a setup. Feels like you set yourself up. I don't know. There was intense public reaction to the events overall. I stood my ground. And you shouldn't have. Quite frankly, this was a bad idea. So yeah, a lot of disingenuousness and weird sort of deflection defense of this, not conveniently, only mentioning as if it was the white lady who used to be a Nazi, who was the only one that opposed her event, and kind of framing it like that. The online harassment never stopped. Not that I agree with necessarily online harassment of people to a certain degree. There seems to be a bit of confusion on strongly criticizing people's I just became aware of consciously, like both of you said this. I guess you both are on TikTok, right? I don't use TikTok, well, as much as I should anyway. I have a TikTok. I'm just not on it very often. I should get back into that because apparently this guy is cool and I should be following him. Consciously, the fella in the clip that I showed earlier where he was talking about, suppressing American history and critical race theory and whatnot. I've been smeared as a fraud, grifter, plagiarist, pro-Nazi, pro-white nationalist, anti-black, anti-indigenous, anti-Semitic, blah, 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 blah. Again, even if you are not those things, you have to consider the nature of your actions and what the consequences of them are and what the fallout is. And then to continue to reflect that, or deflect that rather than reflect on it and question yourself internally. And just sort of like stand your ground through the whole thing despite what other members of the community are saying. I don't know. It's just... the sort of self-promotion and disingenuousness continues. Like even like in that poster, there was a thing about her own, like it had the logo of her business on the poster. I don't know. It just seems suspect. It doesn't seem like the genuines are the intentions are genuine or pure, right? Again, I want to believe that Caryma wants to be a good actor. But I'm not getting that sense. And if she did want to be a good actor, I think she would be reflecting a bit more and not going ahead and like posting this stuff like she posted yesterday. That blasted Chris Sky found a way to ruin my birthday. Dundas Square takeover, Sunday, May 8th. Now, she posts this, and then consider everything else that happened earlier and all that sort of thing. And really, just basically all in all, failing to challenge Chris Sky in any meaningful capacity. This guy, Karen Woods, asks, why are you still following them? And she responded, I no longer cover Chris Sky since I think he's largely irrelevant. But the movement overall remains a notable social phenomenon in my honest opinion. So again, you just posted about Chris Sky and an event he is holding, a rally he is holding, and advertising as a takeover. Like the graphics and the aesthetic and the overall energy of his post are not different from yours. So you're posting about this, but then he's largely irrelevant. He was already irrelevant. His ideas were already irrelevant, yet you poised them as something that needed confrontation. At least after the fact, you tried to poise it as something that needed confrontation. It's just like, just seems so disingenuous and backwards to me. I'm kind of upset about it, to be honest. Oh, sorry. Yeah, frivolous complaints to the Law Society, blah, 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 blah. There was another tweet of hers I wanted to pull up. Oh, yeah, here it is. This is the last thing. Then we're going to be signing off. Yeah, this lady tried physically preventing another protester from speaking to me, which he did not appreciate. Recognize this guy? He was in the video last week where Caryma was videoing him. And there they are talking kind of buddy-buddy. It's just weird to me. Like, you know, she says something later about this. I don't know if I'll get to it or not, but anyway. It's no secret I'm a critic, right? Let's pay attention to that. It's no secret I'm a critic. I think you should stop coming. It seems we are at an impasse. I mean, at least her presence there, just by mere fact of, like, you know, not being super on their side, they find threatening. That says a lot, despite the fact that she's ostensibly like the least threatening person to them. Yeah, smear implies false accusations. Sir Standler, I simply document rallies and share my observations. Yeah. Yeah, it's flattering that she considers me a public figure, but in actuality, I'm nothing more than a private citizen with a big mouth. That's kind of what a public figure is. I mean, Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, and the like of that ilk are nothing more than private citizens with a big mouth, right? You are a public figure. You know you're a public figure. Seems disingenuous to try and deflect that fact, right? And you want to be in and amongst them to be able to document them and be friendly enough with them that they'll allow you to do that. But it seems like they're catching on to your game and they don't much like it. And they don't seem to give a shit about your appreciation for the sharing of ideas, if you will. Yeah. Just disappointing. I feel like a lot of this is, it's self-serving, seems to be building media relations and in promotion of her own business. And that being able to document these rallies from the inside is beneficial to her, so she can't be too, you know. And there's a reason why protesters like the anti-vax guys, like this guy in that first video at the top of the thread. There's a reason why he still wants to keep talking to her, right? Because he obviously feels that it's getting his ideas attention. Yeah. I don't know. Serious concerns there, and I don't feel necessarily satisfied about the defense that she has tried to poise for it. In the same sense, I don't feel satisfied by a lot of those defenses. Like the lady I was talking about at the beginning, where I started the show late because she called me on Facebook Messenger, because basically I was calling her out for following and supporting fascist figures. And I'm sorry, I wasn't completely satisfied by the defense that she had. It seemed like deflection. And it's the same thing that I've experienced with all of these people who are sort of in and around the hate rally. Even if they aren't on board or fully knowledgeable of the white supremacist history and the fascism woven throughout these kind of movements, which again is why it's important to educate on history and these things so people aren't groomed or radicalized or, coerced into these frames of thought that are obviously toxic. But even if you aren't, and you can plead that kind of ignorance, what concerns me is none of them out and out strongly denounce these fascist figures and their ideas. It just seems to be a consistent thing. Like I had a ex-friend who was big into these rallies, and I think I've talked about them on the show before, where I was like, yeah, this picture of right next to where you were standing, there was a guy holding this hate flag. She's like, well, I didn't recognize that symbol. I don't remember that. I didn't see any hate when I was there. It's always this same sort of stuff. Always. Instead of just being aware enough of what the fascists, what fascism is, who the fascists are, and the role they're playing. Like, even if you're totally anti-mandate and that's your only politics that attracts you to this thing, if somebody brings forward to you that you are rubbing elbows with disgusting figures, your reaction shouldn't be to shirk it off like, oh, I didn't see that, I didn't know, I didn't quite remember. Like, if I was told that, my reaction would be, Jesus Christ, that's awful. How do I, shout from the highest rooftop that I'm not with these guys? That I don't want to support what they support. I would be in a bit of a personal moral panic about it myself. I don't want to be a part of supporting that, even accidentally. It's just so weird to me. Very suspect. I don't know. Anyway, that's our show for the day. I am going to, I'm very late, evidently, to starting to cook dinner. I don't know why my headphones are crackling. I hope it doesn't sound crackly out there to you guys. Sounds weird. Anyway, thank you for watching The Rough Report. Go back, continue to watch it from the beginning. I went a little bit over the time today. Talked a lot longer than I expected I would. Anyway, thoughts, feelings, comment them, like and share the video, subscribe to the channel. Anything you can do in way of that non-financial support is highly appreciated. Yeah, if you have any thoughts or feelings, voice them. Write to theroughgo@gmail.com if you feel like it. Thank you so much again for watching, and